Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Podcana episode 59. This week, we're going to be breaking down our testing process for Bochum, the upcoming Disney Lorcana challenge happening in Germany this weekend. It is a very interesting tournament to prepare for because we don't have access to Pixelborn, which has been the case in the past. So, definitely a different approach to testing. Because of that, I've had a chance to play in person, preparing for set championships, which is also coming up, and definitely have some thoughts on what deck I might be playing for that and why. How are you guys feeling now that we're kind of closing in on this tournament, and how does it feel in comparison to the previous tournament in Lille due to the resources that you have access to for testing?
I think I personally do feel the impact of it, believe it or not, for not having that resource to do more testing. I feel like I was a lot more prepared for Lille. That could have just been to do with the fact that before Lille we actually had the set champs as well, which really helped, because I think nearly every weekend, like, you're just playing more and more. So if you were kind of testing decks in those tournaments, that kind of helped. Maybe that's the deck that you chose to actually bring to Lille. But not having Pixelborn has definitely been I've felt the impact, at least personally. I guess the other difference, it doesn't really, like when we talk about testing, it probably doesn't impact testing. But so far, I'm not really a fan of this this meta. I don't know about you guys. It ain't the one. I think if you compare this meta to set 3 meta, I think I would genuinely love to just have another challenge with set 3 meta. I think it'd be super interesting. Because this one so far for me ain't the one. But
Interesting.
I'm excited to try and see some more decks being innovated upon, or like it just maybe it boils down to like what we were talking about. Like, you remember when Pixelborn was here, and like you mentioned it last week, Brendan, week to week we were having like not entire deck changes, but like constant adaptations to trying to make a deck better and stuff like that. I'm sure people are doing that, but obviously like we as a community are not seeing that half as much. So it does give an advantage to players who are really good innovative deck builders and are constantly trying to do that testing and have the testing groups and stuff like that. That's not to say we aren't testing together, but yeah, I at least have felt.
So what do you not like about the meta in particular?
I just don't like the decks in the meta.
But what do you not like about the deck specifically?
I don't like the deck that I think I'm going to be playing, if that sounds like...
I feel like you're playing the deck that makes no decisions, and then you're like, I don't like the meta. Why don't you just play the deck that makes decisions? I understand Green Steel's powerful, but that deck fucking sucks to play. In my opinion. In my humble opinion. It is painful to play. Like, it is a terrible TCG experience. Like, it is... I don't know.
I think it has some, like, front-loaded, super interesting decisions, and then after that, you just play it out.
I had the worst experience of Lorcana I've ever had, which was I actually played an in-person Green Steel versus Green Steel, and it was abysmal. It was, honestly, I think the worst time I've ever had playing this game, because it was just like, and I think I had 2 bookies on the board, my opponent had 2 bookies on the board, so it's literally the first person to play Floodborn wins the game, because then forever the hand is just not there. So it was an awful experience.
Ruby Sapphire mirrors are like that as well now. I think you still make more decisions, but due to the list becoming a lot more streamlined, most lists are not packing any form of interaction, so it feels quite dependent on Lucky Dime. But also, I mean, it's always been dependent on finding the draw engine when your opponent doesn't. I would say, but early Lucky Dimes can feel particularly punishing and painful, and not like the ability to interact with your opponent's threats is definitely less than before. That being said, I mean, that's a choice that's being made by players that are playing that deck. But I would say on the aggregate that the experience in the Ruby Sapphire Mirror is significantly less enjoyable than the previous set, but it's not painful. Anytime I play Green Steel, like, yes, sometimes I get the draw, and it's like, oh man, I see my opening 7 and I'm just going to win the game. And I get that, that quick hit of dopamine. But I feel like 90% of the time I'm playing that deck, I'm like, oh my God, I'm either slowly losing, or my opponent is just like, the game is already over. It's just, I don't know. I just think that it's such a bad, it's kind of a bad TCG experience for me. I mean, I obviously have a proclivity towards a certain type of deck. That makes sense. That's why I'm inquiring. I'm kind of like drilling down, like, what exactly do you not like about the meta? Because I would say, overall, I do like the meta. The meta's definitely a lot more narrow. There's 4 good decks, and the other decks, I mean, especially one with an off-meta deck, they exist, but I wouldn't put them really up in that sort of higher echelon of our top 4. but I don't mind that. Sort of deck diversity and the deck sort of pie, you could say, at a tournament, for me, is not necessarily directly correlated with health of a metagame. So if there's a top 4 decks and it's a bit more narrow than the previous set before, for me, it's very possible that could be actually a better metagame. And I think from an enjoyability standpoint, I've actually enjoyed the set 4 metagame a lot. And yeah, I haven't played it as much, so I haven't had as much time to get burnt out. But I would say overall, I like it. I like the innovations to Ruby Amethyst. I especially like the innovations to Ruby Sapphire. I think that deck is a lot more fun. I also think that Blue Steel is like an awesome deck now. I'm not going to play it, but it does really cool things. Like yesterday, I was playing a game. I was at my Blue Steel opponent had like a dime out, and they had this huge board, and I was at 6. I was at 6 lore. Passes over to me. I had some ridiculous amount of ink. I mean, I basically didn't prioritize the card advantage and ink up until this, and I played. I had Tamato on board, and then I absolutely just like. I had a few how far it goes, drew through my deck, and I had, a few popsicles, and ended up gaining 16 lore in that turn. That's fun. That's fun. It's funny how we get to this, like, we're at this board stalemate. We're both at like less than 10 lore, and it's like, okay, we've come to the inflection point where one of us is going to sort of combo out and win the game. And I enjoy that, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Sapphire Steel is very promising of a deck in terms of the decisions that you're able to make with it, not just when playing the deck, but also there's 3 major versions. There's, do you play Whole New World, do you not play it? And then if you don't play it, do you play One Jump Ahead or Mickey? And then even in all of these versions, the builds are like vastly different. So I think that's really fun. In general, the meta is a little more narrow, as you said, with like top 4 decks. And I think lots of people don't find Emerald Steel particularly fun to play or to play against. So personally, I also much prefer set 3 meta, but I think this meta is good. It's just we've been a bit spoiled because I think set 3 meta was one of the best metas I've ever seen in a card game. And I just want everyone to remember that was maybe like, because we had this opinion floating around before the first challenge events that people were like, oh no, I want to play with the new set, not the boring old set. But I think, again, I think I've said this quite a bunch, but I'm so happy set 3 at least got one big tournament because it really deserved that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And we spoke about it on the pod that set 3 metagame was, I think it was better than set 2 and set 1 metagame. I don't know if I'd be comfortable making the choice right now to say, definitively that set 3 was better than set 4. I would say let a few challenges happen, and then I would kind of decide. But I would say overall, I do like set 4 metagame for sure better than set 2 and set 1. And I think Green Steel is potentially like one of the best, if not the best deck. And I just like everything about that deck at this point. But I'm willing. I think that the other decks and the other archetypes are very competitive, and there's reasons to bring them. And like we've had in the past with Lorcana, a lot of the reasons why you bring a certain deck is actually metagame dependent. So there's a lot of metagaming going on. I think the metagaming aspect of the game has gotten a lot less interesting since Pixelborn left. But overall, looking towards that champs, a lot of my deck decision is based off of metagame, which I think makes the game a lot more fun. There's not this objectively super powerful deck. Also, I have to throw the question back over to Carl real quick because I gotta get an answer to this. When are you gonna fucking start playing the decks that me and Moyen play? You're always playing, like, I feel like anytime me and Moyen play a deck, it's like it gets like blacklisted by you. Like, I'm not playing that deck. No way.
No, it doesn't get blacklisted. It's just again, I'm not. This is not an excuse or whatever, but it tends to be that a lot of those colors and stuff are what my partner tends to play.
Yeah, I forgot you had that limitation.
And it's not. And I honestly, like, the amount of times I'm like, oh, I'm not really feeling this deck, and she's like, oh, you can just play Ruby this if you want. I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, I want to just try and play other stuff because I also want, at least I also want her to play powerful decks, and Red Blue is a deck that she's been playing for the past like 2 sets, and I think as someone that's a lot newer to TCGs, I think it's really important to try and practice, and if the deck is still powerful, like, every single time she plays with it, she gets better. So that's not to say if I really wanted to, I could just buy the few Ruby cards I needed to, do Ruby Amethyst or do something like that. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I was really happy with my deck choice last set because it was like a little bit unusual, yet I still felt it was kind of competitive. This set right now, in my mind, I'm like, after doing this Green Steel stuff of either it's just absolutely nuts or I want to die playing this deck. I don't know, like I'm maybe trying to make my way back to Amethyst Steel, but then I'm really not confident that that deck is as powerful as like. So we're gonna dive into it during like the headlines and stuff like that. But essentially, this past weekend, I was invited to the early set championship media event at the Disney HQ in London. It was an absolute blast. Got to meet loads of people. 16-player event. And round 2, I faced Spessy, who's a great friend of the podcast, and the games were incredibly fun. It was like my most fun I've ever had playing Lorcana because the games were so tight. I'm always happy. Weirdly enough, like I'm nearly happier to lose a game when it's really, really close and just get absolutely rolled. I think most people usually are. But I still don't know if that deck is at the power level or at the consistency that I kind of feel like I'd be happy at. But yeah, it's a weird one. I think it's pretty bad that I'm at this stage. I'm feeling a little bit less confident on deck choice, especially this close to Bochum. And unfortunately, that makes me think that at this stage, I might just have to stick with Green Steel and hope that I can get my draws and do the deck's most powerful thing. Because I was even considering Emerald Amethyst. I did a lot of experimentation with that. I think as an aggro deck, it can kind of outpace Ruby Amethyst, can get past Red Blue pretty easily. And as powerful as that deck is and as fun as it is, I do think it's a little bit weaker to Steel matchups. But I'm like, if you just compare like a kind of aggro deck, not like hyper aggro, but an aggro-ish deck that quests for law, and you compare it to Bucky Green Steel, if you quest for a lot, sure, that's okay. But if you do Bucky Green Steel against the majority of decks, they just can't win if you have the opener. So it's like this deck that just has the most insane opener. I think some people will find it hard maybe not to choose that deck because it is just so powerful if it does the thing that it does. So yeah, me personally, I'm in this weird limbo space where I need to figure out something that beats up on Green Steel a lot and also has game into some other stuff. So like potentially Sapphire Steel. I know that's something that Moyen specifically has been testing recently. So it could be kind of that route. And I do think you're right. I think I enjoy this game a lot more when I have decisions to make. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah,
most people like decisions to some extent.
You say that, but when I walk up to my local, there's a lot of Green Steel players there. I'm not saying Green Steel doesn't make decisions. It's an interesting. We talked about it as soon as they sort of spoiled those the discard packages. It was a really interesting choice for them to go with that as like an archetype, like the defining archetype for Emerald was this turbo discard kind of stuff. Very much feels similar to like what was going on in Magic's, some of Magic's formats with the I think they like renamed them because they basically called them scam decks. They would play cards for free that would make you like turbo discard your hand. It's just absolutely a miserable experience. And yeah, it's basically the same thing as Green Steel. I don't know why they did that. Hopefully Emerald can evolve into something that's a bit more interesting in the future. I'm happy for aggro decks to exist, but discard decks,
I think I'd be happier for aggro decks to exist than for this deck to be where it is right now. I don't know.
The discard thing. Yeah, I mean, discarding just, I think it's kind of, I think it's like almost a net negative game experience where it's not particularly interesting to execute, and it's definitely not particularly interesting to be on the other side of, where it's just like, okay, all of my game decisions have been deleted. Anyway, in other news, other headlines, we do have the t-shirt giveaway. So I have a t-shirt here. This one's an XL. I think I have XL, large, and medium. So for our winner is E-Bacillus. They say, Brendan this is from a review, by the way. It said, Brendan is a wee little man, but the podcast is amazing. Great content, insight, and key guests. Highly recommend. Thank you, Bacillus. For anybody listening to this, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really does help a lot. For Bacillus, just message me, most likely, wherever.
Message in the Discord, right?
Yeah, honestly, the Discord is the best. Yeah. Twitter changes so much. I don't know if like you can. I don't think you can actually DM me because I think you need like Twitter Premium or something like that. And obviously I don't know your Twitter account. So yeah, just tag me in the Discord. We'll get it sent over. Again, XL, large, or medium available. All right. Last thing I want to ask.
What is a wee little man? I don't understand.
Ooh, a wee little man. Have you ever seen Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
You know the halflings?
Mm-hmm.
The hobbits, right?
Those would be
Yeah.
wee little men.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
Call him Brendan a leprechaun, basically.
yeah, makes sense.
Mhm.
All right. Obviously, you played. Anything else you want to say in regards to the set champs? You didn't make it out the first time, but you were able to make it out this time. Like,
Well, the first time wasn't actually set champs. The first time there was a set champs event, I was actually previously invited to like the launch event for set 4. Couldn't make it out to that, unfortunately, but I did make it out to this one.
What is the launch event, by the way?
The launch event is pretty much for a few of the sets now within Disney Lorcana. They've just invited a lot of the UK influencers to like the London Disney store, and you get to open packs and play and do stuff like that, right? Which is great. Like, I think them actually recognizing content creators a lot more and inviting us out to these events is really, really good for the community. I mean, I've already seen the traction that Specie stuff has picked up, which is absolutely amazing. The biggest thing about this one was they actually gave us space to film, which was huge, right? Yes, we did have to bring our own equipment and stuff like that, but to be able to actually showcase these games was an absolute blast. Yeah, we went to the Disney HQ, which was awesome. They showed us around, saw some really, really cool stuff.
So Disney HQ, not Ravensburger?
No, Disney HQ. The Disney HQ, which was really, really cool. One of my highlights, honestly, like a little bit separate from the set champs, was I got to play against Tim, who's the game development manager at Ravensburger in the German team. And he does this fun little thing that when you play against him, if you beat him, he has this playmat that he rolls out, and he has 12 slots or 10 slots, 12 slots that are like numbered, and he'll put a promo on each slot, and then he like roll 2 d6s, and whatever it lands on, you get the promos.
What deck did he play?
He played some really interesting ones. He played Sapphire Steel, which I beat using Green Steel, and then he played. He had a Green Steel deck. I didn't play against him for that, thank God, because I would have hated the mirror. But I know he won a few games. He showed me this really cool, interesting deck. It wasn't. I don't think it's competitive by any level, but it's kind of cool. So it's a Sapphire Emerald deck, and the goal is it's kind of like this really top end combo thing. So on turn 2, you play 1 jump ahead. On turn 3, you play the new Emerald Hades Legendary that when it taps, you can sacrifice a character and you can bring out another character with the same name. So the idea is you do the Hades on turn 3. On turn 4, you play like the 2-cost green Tamatoa, and then on turn 4, you basically bring out Tamatoa, which is kind of cool. So he didn't play that against me, but that was one deck that he showed off. And that was really fun, just getting to chat with him. I know he did a game design talk on Lorcana and was just discussing, their whole kind of development cycle with me and stuff like that. So I found that really, really fascinating, especially with the pace that they're releasing sets, right? It's like every 3 months. So yeah, that was really, really cool. Everyone there was amazing to see. And it was run really, really well. So I hope to be invited to more of those events in the future. I hope they expand that to not only to EU, but I hope maybe Moy gets an invite in the German branch. Brendan can go over to.
I more hope that something I say on this podcast doesn't get you not invited. let's set the bar somewhere we can achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep getting invited.
But yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
All right, cool. Yeah, for sure. I'm interested to see how those play out in the future. And yeah, it's really cool that they set something up for content creators.
Mm-hmm.
Last thing is Pixelborn Connect. That's actually really funny. We spoke about it in the podcast. We're like, yeah, they took down Pixelborn Connect, and it was only Replay Network. And then as soon as we released the podcast, Pavel's like, oh, by the way, Pixelborn Connect comes out on the 1st of July, which is today. That's when we're actually recording this. I haven't had a chance to try it. Have you all had a chance to try it?
I haven't tried it.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's only been out for hours, I think, at this point. I'm keen to give it a shot, to be honest. And that's probably how I'll test mostly for set champs. I've been testing a bit locally with some people around here. But yeah, I mean, maybe it'll be good. What do you think? I'm like, Moyen, this is your kind of a previous Pixelborn, like out of the 3 of us, you are the Pixelborn grinder. How are you feeling about like Pixelborn Connect and playing on webcam? Is that something you would do for practice, or would you more try to do internal testing and then you would play a webcam if it was like a tournament that had good EV?
So internal testing is the try hard thing you do if it's like very high EV tournaments. Because it's like you need to set it up, and it's much more of a hassle than it's actually work. But then something like Pixelborn Connect would be the everyday practice you get in just to stay on top of the game. I don't know, will Pixelborn Connect have ranked or no?
It looked like it.
Pixelborn Connect is not launching with ranked yet. It should be coming next week.
Okay, because as soon as it does have ranked, you usually, if the ranked system is good, you can grind to the top of the ladder and get decently good practice there. And when it doesn't, it's like lab from old Pixelborn, where that almost doesn't qualify as practice. But if we get ranked, I think it's extremely likely I will try to get to the top.
Okay, cool. I'm keen to see that. I'm interested to see the ranked or high level webcam gameplay. Definitely will be some kinks to iron out, and I'm sure there's going to be a couple turds on there, but maybe likely we'll get something smooth going quickly. I'll probably be playing too. I think that I actually prefer playing on. So it's a toss up, right? Like I prefer playing on webcam because it's more engaging for me. Like I actually enjoy the playing aspect of it more. That being said, I don't enjoy, getting together physical cards, trying to build a deck, having, not being able to switch it out quickly, not being able to switch decks quickly. I don't enjoy that aspect. So a little bit of a push and pull there, but I fully expect to be playing on Pixelborn Connect. And yeah, I'm excited. Anyway,
do you know what else? Actually, I just want to mention really quickly. And I spoke to Moyne about this earlier today, and just you're saying any other thoughts on set champs? Yeah, I played very badly in one of my games, very, very badly, and I think I kept just being mad at myself, and this is just something important to kind of recognize, especially when we're coming into webcam games and stuff, because it's kind of a prime example of the difference when Pixelborn existed and now Pixelborn doesn't exist. Was I was just playing against Ruby Amethyst, and my god, that stupid 3-drop Sisu, where it cares about how many cards your opponent has in their hand. When I look at that card, I'm like, it's a 1/4. It's just a 1/4. I'm like, oh, I've got 1 or 2 cards in my hand. Oh, it doesn't really matter. So the amount of times where I thought I was hitting into it to kill it off, and my dude was surviving with a certain amount of health, and my guy just wasn't. I'm like, oh yeah, the card's just dead. That's shit that webcam games, I'm hoping at least, will help me with, and just more in-person practice and stuff like that, right? It's the cards that it's not so obvious what's there, you know what I mean?
We need the plus angst strength tag.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Wasn't Brian telling us that his opponent kept stacking them or something like that in the challenge? Because on the webcam games in Lorcana challenge, obviously they have those little tokens that you can say, oh, it's evasive, it's rush. And I think his opponent just wanted to keep stacking +1 strength, +1 strength, +1 strength. Yeah.
I played a physical tournament yesterday. It was a win-a-box. I went X1. So yeah, you have to go undefeated to basically do. Anyway, I definitely made a couple of mistakes. Not mostly in the same vein that you're talking about, where they were mechanical mistakes. For instance, I have an ice block on board. It's been on board for a while. I'm going to kill something, and it's not going to kill my character, but I forget to activate Ice Block and actually reduce the damage by 1 and take an additional damage counter. Sounds like no big deal. That stuff really irritates me. I'm like, what the fuck? Dude, I actually, when I make mistakes, I usually don't tilt, but when it's something like that, I'm just when I know it's due to me just not taking my time, really irritates me. It really frustrates me.
I'm the same. Yeah, when you know that it's something so small that you're the weird thing about that Sisu is I know I'm kind of thinking about it, but then I'm not at the same time, because I don't really care about how many cards in my hand. Usually I'm just caring about removing something, right? Or what's the most efficient way to do it? And then when I execute it, I'm like, oh fuck, I needed to actually think about what was in my hand, When
I sequence a very long Ruby Sapphire turn, towards mid or end game, and then I ever encounter a scenario where I could have drawn cards.
You could have done something else first. Yeah.
No, it's not even that. Yeah, when I could have drawn cards earlier in the sequence for more information.
Yeah, that is extremely tilting.
Yes, it is extremely tilting.
Last Saturday, I played a One Piece event after my main leader got banned. So I played a new one. I think I played overall pretty well. But what I'm getting towards is, so at one point I was 6-1, and the only loss I got, my opponent had their cards off the frame for about 5 seconds in one instance. And it happened 2 or 3 times. So I submitted the footage. I was I don't know that these are still the cards that they had in their hand previously, and I still they didn't overturn the match results, so that I felt like that could have been deserving, but I assume my opponent must have just gotten a warning, and that maybe I could have done something if I like reported it in the moment, but then I just reviewed the footage afterwards and was like, okay, this is a little much.
Yeah.
But
The
happens in
joys
webcam
of
games, I
competitive
guess.
webcam gaming.
Yeah.
Everybody's cheating, kind of. Not really, but yeah, it's just a nightmare.
Yeah, no, it's like even all things considered, I thought was like my opponent probably didn't cheat, but how can I know?
Yeah.
I really cannot.
Yeah, I mean, best case scenario is you just don't play webcam competitive events. It's just like never works out. But anyway, let's go into our building section, our listener question section. I'm cutting it short this week because I want to talk about the metagame and specifically listen lead up to Bochum. So let's have a few questions here. If you want to get your question around on next week's podcast, you can shoot us a comment on YouTube. I'll pass over to you, Kala.
Yeah, so first one's from Grundle. 46 minutes and 50 seconds of the previous podcast. In regards to maybe more people go to locals, I was going fairly regularly until the shutdown, but haven't played a constructed game since Set 4 dropped. I did do drafts for a few weeks. The thing is, I've never played a single game of Pixelborn. What the shutdown did was make it so I'm no longer watching Savich stream while I play Runeterra or checking out new off-meta decks someone posted to YouTube on my lunch break. I simply don't really engage with the game outside of the weekly local. This makes it so when I'm deciding what to do with my Saturday, I'm way less inclined to go play Lorcana when I fully haven't thought about it for a week. I'm just saying the loss of Pixelborn content removes the game's day-to-day engagement, which will hurt overall interest and attendance with locals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like even myself with the less kind of content that's there, like I think Grundle made a great point of just like general deck inspiration, even if it's like off-meta stuff. That's always interesting to watch and think about. And like your mind is how do you say it? It's like you're unconsciously thinking or subconsciously, whatever it is, like in the back of your mind, you kind of like you have Lorcana in your brain when you're doing your other daily tasks and stuff like that. And maybe when it comes to your Saturday and you want to build a deck or whatever, like, oh, like I saw this video or I was thinking about this, like it's just kind of on the forefront of your mind. But I think a lot of people have slow down content because it's
I did not fully appreciate the impact of Pixelborn being taken down in regards to content. Because, for us, like, we're going to do the weekly podcast no matter what. Like, maybe deck techs are more of a pain in the ass, but we're probably still going to do the tier lists, pre-Bochum. Like, it doesn't impact us too much. But then I go look at Spessie's channel, and Spessie's posting right now because he's got gameplay footage, but it was like, hadn't posted in 3 weeks. I go look at Savija's channel, hasn't streamed since Pixelborn went down, streamed Hearthstone Arena the day after Pixelborn went down, and then stopped streaming. I'm just like, damn. Because that was actually, honestly, the way I engaged with Lorcana the most on a day-to-day basis, and I'm sure a lot of people can empathize with this, was actually just watching Savij. Like that was always in the background. Like I really enjoyed that. That was like part of my day, pretty much every single day. And yeah, I feel it. That's gone.
There's other reasons for those as well. I think Savij is on holidays, and then Spessie's PC broke down. But I think even if those things wouldn't have happened, they would have still struggled to create content. I'm pretty sure Savij is now looking for a new main game to stream again. I mean, Spessie has to rethink the way he does content.
For Spessie, right? Think about it. Like, if Spessie didn't have the set champ stuff, I know he went to locals and he recorded some games as well, but when I saw Spessie rock up to the set champs, my man had like 2 full bags of like lights, camera gear. He's like, I hate this. I absolutely hate this. But it's like, has to be done, right? So, and that's like a huge cost as well. Like, he was telling me how much he spent on this equipment as well. He's like, oh, it'll definitely be worth it in the long run, which I do agree. But overall, it's like, I don't know if Spessie has many people he can practice with in close proximity. So either he's going to locals or he has to have like a really, really clean, nice webcam setup. And like all of this it's not as easy as just loading a game on your PC, opening OBS, and then clicking start stream, right? Like there's a lot more to it.
The post,
and edit it too,
post processing is like post is way
it's
more.
very tedious, right? It's like up one lore,
also
add this card,
showing the card, also, like the card doesn't visually display what it's doing, like it's a nightmare.
Also, Spessie is now putting in all this effort, and he'll be fine, right? But he already has his platform. What if someone that hasn't done content before wants to now start doing content, and suddenly there's this barrier of entry where you have to buy all the stuff and put in this much more effort.
I think that there's an opportunity, actually. Like, I do agree that the barrier to entry is much higher, but I actually think there's an opportunity, because I would say at this point, and I'm just pulling this number straight out of my butt, that 90% of content creators have been absolutely clipped. Like 90% of content creators in Lorcana were relying on Pixelboard as a way to do content. So there's a huge void. And I think I've seen a few people take advantage of that void. Like, I did film an in-person video with the Lorcana channel. That did pretty well. Like, they were at like 400 subscribers when they filmed it. I think they ended at almost 800. The video did almost 10, like it's at like 6 or 7K right now. I saw like another channel do the same thing. It's like that versus mode. Keep in mind that the Lorcana channel probably has, I mean, it could be anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 worth of cameras, like very, very expensive, but it's used for other things as well. And the other video I saw, I can't remember who did it, so I'm sorry, but it was like a versus style as well. The production quality was pretty high. So I think there's an opportunity, if you have those resources and you know how to execute that kind of content, I think there's an opportunity to sort of come in and become one of those content creators and grow. But first of all, you need friends, and then you need cameras, and then you have to know what you're doing. Because like getting that all set up and not making audio mistakes, video mistakes, and then having to edit in all the cards, like it is just so much harder. But sort of my point here is I do think there's an opportunity for people that, you know, maybe weren't having success in the previous cycle when Pixelborn was the thing, or weren't content creators, to actually come in and sort of become content creators in Lorcana and be very successful. It's just a lot harder.
I will say, keep an eye out, guys, for content will be coming to the Podcana channel. I actually haven't spoken to Brennan or Moyne about. I was speaking to Moyne about this briefly, but I just finished setting up like a really nice. It can be for streaming and for overlays and stuff like that. But when I say it's crisp, I mean it is crisp. So if you guys missed like deck techs and just gameplay and stuff like that, I finally have the facility to actually make that stuff look really, really good.
Is that in your house?
Stay tuned.
Do you have it set up in your house?
Yeah. So believe it or not, I used to have it set up literally right behind me, but my room is so small that it got so hot in here that it was uncomfortable to play. So I moved it down to a separate room, separate PC. And mate, honestly, like I spent the past month working with someone to try and get an overlay and make everything work. I even have it set up so that editing and stuff like that is less tedious in terms of I have like real time lore counting, lore tracking, all that type of stuff. So yeah, if you guys missed the gameplay and stuff like that, let us know if you want to see that, because I'm excited to do that. And like Brendan mentioned, I actually enjoy playing like that as well. I just think it's more enjoyable playing in person and stuff.
That content is going to do very well, because there's I mean, it just like, I would say, the vast majority of people just cannot do that. I mean, it just takes so much. Not only does it take the cameras, but it takes a lot of knowledge,
space, everything, right?
Yeah,
like
everything.
Yeah.
And then the hardest one is you have to have someone to play with. You got to have a friend. So cool. I'm excited for that. Anyway, next one is from...
next one's from Stuart. Yeah, says it would be cool to see you guys build deck lists together and come up with the optimal build of decks in real time on Dreamborn. Start with blue red. Lol. That would be interesting. I'm going to put this question to Moyne only because I do think that would be an interesting video to watch. However, there's also the difference of like I don't know, it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, right? Like, oh, we're doing a live stream of building like the new red blue deck. We cracked the meta, and like I think it is generally a good thing, because I mean, let's bring it back to set 1 when Brennan and Moyne introduced Evasive into Ruby Amethyst. They weren't going to just sit here and be like, oh, well, we just know what to do. We're not going to share this, right? I think for the most part, we want to share content. We want to share deck lists and stuff. But I guess I'll pass it over to Moyne. How would you feel about doing like live deck building stuff?
I right now, I don't know if I get the point. I guess if I put in the cards live, what does it change in comparison to seeing the final deck?
Yeah,
it takes longer, right? That's what it changes.
It's also not really how the process works. Like a lot of those processes, like first of all, so the one thing that we do that you might not be familiar with, or that might be cool to watch, is like often we'll be like, okay, let's build blue red. Here are the 40 to 50 cards that we would never take out. We build a shell, and then we add in, you know, the next 10 to 20.
So I guess that could be interesting, showing like what is the shell, and then what is like maybe kind of still the shell, but could be thought about, and then what are the options for the other cards? What are they better against? What are they worse against? But like all of that takes like lots of iterations of testing, and then even at the end you have an imperfect, or not an imperfect deck, but it probably is imperfect, and you're you never know that it would be perfect. Plus, it is also contextual.
Very iterative process, like you said. Like it is, if we don't really just build a deck and we're like, yes, it's we build the deck and then it sucks, and then we go back and we change some things, and then et cetera, et cetera. And honestly, a lot of the things like evasives, I remember we added Bell back in the deck at one point. Like sometimes those are just like random. Okay, there's like 10 ideas that come out. There's like 9 shit ideas, and there's one that like sneaks in there. It's like, what if we added like this card in, and then nothing happens, and then we try it and it works. But like for every one that works, there's like 9 that don't work. So it's just, I don't know. It's just kind of random.
A lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about that, Garrett says, also be very interested in hearing about how you guys would do a proper test. So do a testing session and stuff. Most of the time, I think we've all been kind of busy over the past few weeks, but if we really want to test, we just kind of do like gauntlets most of the time. Every day. I love it, by the way, because I should be practicing more, but every morning I start my day off by checking the group chat, and mine's just like, all right, who's ready to play? Let's do this. So, I mean, that's great. I think, honestly, that actually motivates me as well. And I think that, like, if you guys have that little internal testing group and stuff, and there's people that want to be practicing, even when you're feeling like a little bit down, like, I felt a little bit shit coming off of my atrocious set champs run, but I need to be brought back up, right? I need to get back into the swing of things and start practicing again. But is there anything else you want to mention, Moyen or Brendan, about like what you guys do to like properly test? Like, if you guys, okay, let's say you guys had like 2 hours this evening, you guys wanted the test, right? You've been playing a list. You just say, okay, Brendan. Moyen says to Brendan, I'm playing red blue, and I want to run the gauntlet. Play X amount of games against me with this deck, that deck. Are you changing cards? Are you trying different things? Like, how would you best utilize, let's say, like 2 hours in the evening to do testing?
So 2 hours is actually, believe it or not, is very little. So I wouldn't even try to really test multiple matchups in that time. And then for the matchups that I also don't think I would be changing my deck in these 2 hours. But for these 2 hours, we could specify a matchup that we want to learn more about, what cards being in my deck impact the matchup in what way, but also what playlines work against which playlines. And then really pay attention to what openings do well against what openings, how in what spot do you get after the first 5-6 turns if I did XYZ, you did XYZ. And also what's an even for this type of testing that's not just that doesn't focus on all the details and nuances of each game. You could go a step further to make it even more efficient, where you manipulate your starting hands to force certain openings against certain openings to see what needs to happen for me to get into which position.
Yeah,
I also think that doing something that like I've done when I was I can't remember who I was testing it against, but like talking through the hands of both players sometimes helps. So like I'll be like, oh, I think I misplayed, and most of the time my opponent will be like, oh, like how do you think you misplayed? I think asking those questions is good, not just like, oh, I fucked up and then moving on, right? Like talk about, oh, okay, I think I misplayed because I didn't ink this card in case I drew this, or maybe this or that. Like it's important to like maybe not play with open hands, but like semi-open hands, if that makes sense. Because if you play with open hands, then you might run the risk of like sometimes always like playing like too perfectly when you won't always have that information, right? It's like your opponent tells you, oh, I have 3 cards in my hand. They happen to all be 3 uninkable Medusas. You know what I mean? Like that's rarely going to be the case.
So I think practicing with open hands is more efficient if you are good enough to offset any biases that you could potentially encounter. So where you still try to make reads based on your opponent plays. Okay, these 2-3 cards could be any of these 4 or 5 cards, and then making a play based on that and not what cards they actually have in hand.
I agree.
Yeah. Slightly different question that I would answer, but for me, by far the most interesting thing when it comes to testing process is like how to curate the correct group, how to build the right group, how to institute discipline, how to sort of actually make sure you're focused testing towards a specific goal, how to collect data, how to visualize and understand said data, and yeah, how to basically get a group of 9 nerds or 9, 10, 15 nerds together and actually come out with a reasonable result. That's a lot harder than you think it is. It's really tough. And like honestly with these groups as well, like it's hard to have direction. Like nobody wants to be the person that's like policing the group, giving direction and trying to understand like the macro of everything and trying to come to specific results. But you need to be super organized. And I find that the groups that do have that organization are extremely successful. But the sort of the logistics of getting people together and testing, and definitely more specifically focused testing towards a very specific goal, it's actually extremely challenging. Like it's very, very hard.
Yeah, in something like Hearthstone, it used to be so easy. You had like monthly ladder results to know who's actually good at the game. You had all these tournament results, and then you could curate a group from there. But also now, it's much more difficult. You don't really know who is good at the game for most players.
Yeah, and you get all these early game egos. So like early in the game, you got
there's big egos in the game, and also for me personally, I've been asked a lot from people that wanted to prep with me, and I always felt bad because I can't say yes because I don't know the player. Like, and that's not their fault, but like I can't really agree to practicing with someone I don't know, and so I always kind of have to say no, even though I'm looking for players to practice with.
Yeah, that's where and I don't want to say this as if it comes off as a bad thing, but like that's where like the coaching stuff kind of comes in a sense that like, I don't want to say this in a bad way. It's like, oh, pay me money and then you can prep with me. Like that's not what Moyen does when he does coaching. Like, yes, there's a monetary thing, of course. Like, I mean, you're kind of paying him for his time and stuff. But I also agree with him, right? Like, if there's someone that I've seen that has got a good result, and I feel like I know them through a friend or I reach out and they're willing, like there has to be that kind of like connection. Yeah. So I think the best thing is in like, for your average person, I think like, you see, oh, there's the rat, he won Chicago. Let me just message him in his Discord. He'll definitely reply to me and I'll have the best player to prep her. Right? Like, it's not going to work like that. You know what I mean? So like, I think there's people within your groups, if you're going to locals and stuff, if there's people who are a little bit more competitive, like, you see them week to week, try to take advantage of the people that you interact with on a daily basis. That doesn't just have to be in your local vicinity, right? Like join competitive Discords, join the 20 Lore Pro, join our Discord. The amount of people that I'm sure that I've started to prep together from just messaging in Discord servers and stuff like that is immense. So like that's the things I would recommend you guys doing. Like it's the best way. Like Brandon said, the hardest thing is finding the people to do it, but joining communities like that is the way to do it, honestly.
I have 2 things. One, Moy makes us pay him to play test. If you guys didn't know.
No, I don't.
Yes, he does. Yeah,
yes, he does. Yes, he does. He sends. He
Maybe
just,
I
he
should,
just sends
but
the.
I don't.
He sends the invoice. Yeah.
Sends the invoice at the end. Yeah. Anyway, I think people get the priorities wrong. Actually, I think that people focus way too much on if someone is good or not, when really what I actually need is somebody humble or not. Because if they're not humble, I don't care how good they are at this game, because honestly, nobody's really that, like, there's so many people that are good at Lorcana right now that are not actually that good, and that's including us. But if people don't have the humility to sort of try to set aside their biases, whether that's toward an archetype, towards a deck, towards a result, towards a string of results, like those people are so ridiculously useless and toxic to a testing process. Like
they're worse than useless.
Yes,
they actually hurt the testing process.
Detrimental. Yeah. So I actually care so much less about results than I do about how somebody approaches a process and their ability to sort of humble themselves and try to find the objective result rather than, oh, I'm known for this deck and I got this result and I want this deck to be good in the testing process because I don't like control decks. And it's like that might sound ridiculous when I say it, by the way. That is definitely more common than not. It is more common that someone has these results biases, these ego biases, and they're just terrible to test with because of that. Also, you get those people that you test against them and they're trying to fucking win like they're not trying to test, they're just like trying to win, and they get upset when they lose. They start to tilt, and you're like, what is like? It's just the weirdest Timmy thing, and it's super common, super common. And so I really care about people's mentality and their approach more than I do about their sort of, are you 1% better than the alternative option? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, optimally you'd have both, and I guess them being humble and not having an ego is also difficult to judge.
Yeah, but what tends to happen is that if you are humble and you're able to objectively look at results and you're willing to learn, guess what? You actually tend to be pretty fucking good at the game as well. Because what makes people bad is not doing that.
Yeah.
The next comment's from Michael. It says, first off, let me start out by saying you guys are great and I wish you all the best. My question is, what are all the different ways you guys would go about teaching Lorcana to newcomers to the game? God, we have a lot. How many episodes talking about card game fundamentals and stuff now? We talk about that as often as we can in our episodes, but we do have dedicated episodes to that as well.
Honestly, the answer to this too is like not necessarily listen to this podcast. Not a very beginner podcast. And people have pointed out, they're like, "Oh, I didn't understand this reference," and it's fine. Maybe we could explain things a bit more, but this is not the best podcast to start with. And there's tons of resources out there. We've done more beginner level podcasts and beginner level content, but you just I think you have to get a foundation, understand the metagame, and then once you're kind of at that like medium sort of like starting to compete level, then you should that's where our resources come in. And I actually think that if you are a hardcore grinder, if you're doing well at Lorcana challenges, like our content is for some part not actually for you. It's not for like the world class top players. Like they're in the same kind of thought processes as us. Like I mean they're testing horizontal or alongside us. We kind of target that just like that beginning competitive player, intermediate player. But there's tons of beginner content out there. Honestly, if this comment had come out 2 weeks ago, I said go play Pixelborn. It resolves the rules for you, and it's got everything you need, and there's a ranked ladder. But no, for beginner, there's some content out there, and honestly, you just got to get out there and start playing your local game store, and you get better.
Next one, I love this comment. This is from Pug. It says, hello. Thanks for your content. Always interesting. I'm looking for a coach to prepare for championships and Bologna Challenge. What is the best way to contact you? Moyen. Plug
Moyen.
Your coaching right here.
Yeah, okay. So it is like Twitter and Discord DMs, but I must apologize because today I replied to all of them, but there has been some coaching requests that I hadn't replied to in like over 2 weeks. So yeah, I just haven't gotten around to it until now. But yes, it is my Twitter or my Discord DMs are both fine.
I had some people reach out to me. I haven't replied yet. I don't do coaching. I do not have the time to do coaching. So,
and I have had 0 people reach out to me. So I'm not a coacher either. Absolutely not.
I changed up some of like the Twitters to put like a email address on there for business inquiries because I hadn't done that in the past. I was like, okay, that's clearly not a good idea. So I had some people reaching out like via email there, and I was
I had. Wait, were you the reason why I got emails?
What was it? No. I don't know. I put like some aggregate email in there for everything.
Okay.
It's just like my name. But I don't coach. I do not.
Here's an interesting one. Next comment's from Balding. Says, looking forward to another Ruby Amethyst deck tech before set champs if possible. If I have to edit another Ruby Amethyst deck tech on this show. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Like, I actually don't think we have time now, unfortunately. But possibly, again, it's a lot of the time when it comes to Ruby Amethyst stuff, it's on these boys. It ain't on me. But I think a format, especially without Pixelborn at the moment in our current setup, I think the tips and tricks thing that Brendan did for the previous Ruby Amethyst in set 3 went down a treat. So if you guys wanted to make even something short like that, listen, I'll say if a lot of people want that, let us know in the comments and we'll make it for sure. I think our priorities right now for content is we will most likely be doing a tier list before Bochum. I think that's going to be quite good. And anything else in between. But if you guys want to see specific stuff, just let us know in the comments. We'll be sure to hop on it.
Tips and tricks, aka turn on the camera and wing it for 30 minutes.
That was a good video.
Yeah, it did well, Brandon.
I guess regarding the tier list, I don't think it will be that different.
I don't think so.
It's not going to be that different.
Okay.
Re-uploads the same video.
It'd be pretty accurate, to be honest. It'd be pretty accurate.
Yeah.
I think green steel will go down a little bit, but that's about it. Yeah. about it.
Yeah, we've got tons of other questions from Spilding, so keep bringing your questions in. But for now, we're going to move on to metagame talk because we do have a lot to talk about leading into Bochum.
Yes,
So thank you so much, as always. Actually, I will say to you boys now, we should definitely check out the Discord for some more Spilding stuff because there were some interesting questions I saw in there the other day. So we'll take a look there as well. So starting off, I guess we're going to start off with Ruby Amethyst. Moyen, sorry, not Ruby Amethyst. Ruby Sapphire is the first deck list I see here. Have you switched off that item list that everyone was so eager to look at? I believe it was last week or the week before. Are you still on that list, or have you changed it up?
I mean, it looks less and less likely that will be the deck that I'm bringing to Bochum.
Mhm.
I think it's all right. It was fun. It was very innovative. Is that how you pronounce it?
Innovative, yeah.
Innovative. And like it's fine, but I don't think it's quite good enough in comparison to the other top 4.
Somebody was playing that
it's just,
list next
I guess,
to me, I feel like, or something very close to it.
So the main, if you make the read that there will be little Emerald Steel, because I think it kind of sacrifices that matchup to get better in the other matchups. If you make the read that there's very little Emerald Steel, it might be a valid bring because it does improve the Sapphire matchups a decent bit.
I have some questions
to the stock list
regarding Ruby Sapphire. So honestly, I've been sitting with your rank 1 list quite a bit. It's kind of like my default that I work from. By the way, list in the description if you're listening. But I have questions. Now. So Green Steel, good matchup. Mirror, rough, but fine. Mirror's a bit flippy, fine. Blue Steel, fine. I think it's a fine matchup. I think it's fine. Ruby Amethyst, not fantastic. So I think we need to tech this deck for Ruby Amethyst. I think Ruby Amethyst is going to show up in force, and I think we can tech the deck, actually. I want to ask about additions of things like Scar and potentially Shield of Virtue into the deck. I also want to ask about the 4th B prep. I know we looked at lists last week that we're not including Fishbone Quill. I think that Fishbone Quill is actually very good versus Ruby Amethyst, and I think it's particularly good against Sapphire Steel, but that comes as no surprise to anybody. What do you think about Scar and Shield of Virtue? I honestly think that we can fit them in.
I'm not sure Shield of Virtue does more. I'm not sure Shield of Virtue does more than Vitalosphere. Because Vitalosphere enables like your Sisus and Tamatoas to rush into castles, which is very good. But Vitalosphere is also a little bit of a mediocre card because he's like sacrificing an entire card for this rush action. I guess it's also an incredible item, so it's like always okay, but it's still not great. Gar, I don't think has been tested all that much, and I think there could actually be a spot for it.
Castle is just an absolute beatdown right now. It's
it's not like it's much different than Maui, and also even if Scar doesn't banish the castle, even if it can just like banish 1 or 2 characters and then hit 6 into the castle, that enables you to win some games that would otherwise be unwinnable. So the uninkable slot is rough because the deck has like great amount of really, really good uninkables that it can include, but I think it would improve the Ruby Amethyst matchup.
What do you think about this is a real stretch, but what do you think about like Scuttles? And I know the list is tight. I'm not a fan of Scuttle, but Bee King Undisputed and Lady Tremaines are everywhere right now. It seems like it would behoove us to be able to put another cheap character that isn't absolute dog shit onto the battlefield to sort of insulate some of our Tamatoas and higher value, sort of, higher curve characters. What do you think? It didn't feel detrimental to me, but I just can't, I kept encountering scenarios where, we would B prep, my opponent would B prep, or I could B prep, and I had my Tamatoa, which is usually my Haymaker, and I'm like, shit, this gets 1-for-1 by a 3 cost. Like, this is
I think
tough.
So it also only has 1 strength, which is not a lot. And I think on 12 items, the hit rate is quite low. But if you want to play a character that plays around Bee King Undisputed or Tremaine, I might just opt to play the evasive Pegasus.
I was literally thinking about the same card. Yeah,
which one is that?
It's a 2/3/1 evasive.
3/1 evasive because it gives you maybe a bit of game into the Diablos, but besides that, because not that you really need it with this deck, but I was actually this is a bit of a weird crossover, but like I was saying to you guys, I was testing Emerald Amethyst, and I actually put 2 or 3 Sir Hiss into the deck because it was like, oh, maybe it answers Diablo. And I was like, wait a minute, a 3/1 evasive is really good at hitting certain locations. Like, it's a card that will just hit a location. If they don't really have an evasive, it's not really going to answer it. So, like, those high attack evasive cards, they actually don't like. And again, it could also help answer the castle potentially if it sticks a little bit. So,
and it can quest for what? Like, Cruella can also maybe contest these stuff, but it usually has to wait until it does it, while Pegasus gets to like quest until you do it. It's not like Pegasus is great, and when they play like Diablo plus Let the Storm Rage on, you actually get punished for trying to contest it with Pegasus. But I think I would rather go there if I would want an extra 2-drop.
Pegasus as well. Yeah, I want to note that even though yes, it is vulnerable to the Diablo Let the Storm Rage on, having a 3/1 evasive is really good, because like a problem that a lot of people face if you're playing Sapphire Steel or whatever, you know, they do Diablo and they play Hidden Cove, they move the Diablo to the Cove. You can't, like, you know, your babooms, your stuff doesn't work. Whereas with a 3/1 Pegasus, you can still deal with a Diablo and a Cove, right? So it's actually quite interesting.
I like it. I didn't think about this card. I actually like this card way more than Scuttle. It seems very congruent with a lot of things we're trying to do. So obviously Diablo's a problem. Our deck is teched for Diablo, but a lot of other things that are a problem are locations. Like, I even had my blue steel opponents dropping locations on me, and a 3/1 is a pretty good stat line for said locations. So I'm into it, to be honest. I really like that card. I really like the idea of that card. We should definitely test that. Coming back to the Scar, like, I feel like we need some sort of top end because I just felt like constantly throughout the game, and honestly through a lot of the game, I was like, damn, if my opponent just drops freaking castle, I lose. That's what it feels like. I have, in regards to Ruby Sapphire, I have a question in regards to specifically Ruby Amethyst. So in the opener against Ruby Amethyst, and I guess I'm asking this question both on the draw and the play, do you keep the Brawl for the Flynn? Like, how important is it to get rid of the Flynn? Because it does feel like if the Flynn activates multiple times, that you're in a really, really, really bad spot, because now you get into this critical maximums of floor where they can kind of go bounce you out of the game. What are your thoughts about Brawl and the Ruby Amethyst matchup?
Did you say whether you're going first or second?
Either or, you can answer on both ends.
Okay. I think going second, you're kind of forced to brawl it, because otherwise you're very bad against the Flynn Sisu. While on the play, you can totally afford to mulligan it away, because you'd much rather, if you go one jump ahead on 2, they go Flynn on 2, you'd much rather just play Tala, which is actually often the preferred follow-up to one jump against Ruby Amethyst, because it immediately stops the 3 lure. And it doesn't get brawled, so it like also does a very good job contesting. And then you can also do stuff like into Maui, or maybe you after the one jump you just play Fishbone Quill, you let them get 3 lure, then you Medusa their Sisu, because you inked so many cards out of your hand, and then the Flynn doesn't do too much. But I think going second, you should keep the Brawl, but going first, there's much more powerful stuff you can do.
Okay. What do you think about the Fishbone Quill? Obviously, we saw List do very well without Fishbone Quill. My immediate experience, playing with Fishbone Quill yesterday was that it felt quite good against Ruby Amethyst, and it's amazing versus Sapphire Steel. I can't see cutting it. What are your thoughts?
I also cannot see cutting it. It has gotten less important.
Definitely.
To how the deck functions, and especially because hand size is so important in the Mirror and Emerald Steel. But it's very good against Ruby Amethyst. It's the main reason Sapphire Steel often wins against Ruby Sapphire is by beasting your Quill, because that's how important it is to have a Quill up against the whole New World lists. And then when you just don't play a Quill, they wouldn't even need that. Or I guess they could, if they were to beast Great Stone Dragon, that would be even worse, because you didn't even get anything out of it.
Yeah, and my thoughts on a Great Stone's Dragon is that I think it's good versus Green Steel, but I don't think it's necessary, like, at all.
And I don't think it's as good as people make it out to be. It's no. It makes it like very slightly better, maybe. Like it's fine against Emerald Steel, but it's really nothing groundbreaking.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, let's talk about Ruby Amethyst. This is the list. So there's one last thing I have to say about Ruby Sapphire, and that's that I, for the most part, do not plan to play it in set championships or store championships, and that is because some of those are going to be best of 3. So in any best of 3 format, I am extremely unlikely to play Ruby Sapphire, because it is very hard to finish games. It was hard to finish games in set 3. I think it's harder in set 4. So pairing into an opposing Ruby Sapphire or pairing into a Blue Steel, I think that it is absolutely, you are very likely, not very likely, but it's a huge risk to actually have an unintentional draw, which I would like to avoid. And I think there's another deck in the format that is very, very competitive that will not encounter that. At least it'll be extremely unlikely. And that's Ruby Amethyst. This is a deck that I'm looking at for the set championships. I might switch up my deck, if when I go play the Dallas Lorcana Challenge here coming up in a couple weeks, because that's going to be best of 2. But right now, Ruby Amethyst is my sort of pick for this upcoming store championship circuit. Hey, y'all's thoughts on the deck. My first question I have is this list good enough versus Green Steel? Like, how bad does that matchup feel? Because I've heard people say, hey, it's actually not that bad. Hey, it's actually pretty good. And then the same person said that to me, came up to me after round 2. It was like, I just got fucked by Green Steel. That deck sucks. I was like, bro, you said it wasn't that bad. No, they said that their opponent had like the double Bucky draw. But how bad is the Green Steel matchup?
I mean, this deck beat me. Yes, I made 1 or 2 mistakes, but it felt rough. And again, like it's just variables and stuff like that. But both games, when I played against Ruby Amethyst player, I did my Bucky discard stuff. It was turn 6. I got them down to 1 card in their hand, and they were on, I think it was 5 ink. Yeah, they're on 5 ink, 1 card in hand. And I'm like, the 1 card in their hand has to be a Medusa. They have to top deck an Inkable. I think it was like to kill my Robin Hood or whatever. Same opener pretty much 2 games in a row, and that was the Medusa twice. So it's like sticking certain cards like Medusa and stuff is like really, really good. Some Be King Undisputeds can be really, really good. It just depends on like the opener. I think if a Green Steel player has the nuts opener, there's no deck that can really beat it. But I think that this deck can beat Green Steel. I still don't think it's like favored. But do you guys think there's anything that this deck should be doing to maybe try and tech against Green Steel a little bit more, or should it just focus on kind of what it's doing?
There's one thing I want to say is I actually think that Ruby Sapphire does beat the Green Steel nut draw. Like if it has its pieces, so it has its ramp and it also has its brawl to deal with the Diablo. Like I think that Ruby Sapphire can actually beat the nut draw out of Green Steel.
I think if Ruby Sapphire goes first, their nut draw beats Emerald Steel nut draw. But I think if Emerald Steel goes first and they have the nut draw, I'm not sure. Even the nut draw for Ruby Sapphire can beat that. But I actually think this version of Ruby Amethyst that we're talking about now, with the less 1 drops, including the Maleficence, 4B preps, which is like the very default core of the deck, is basically as good as the deck is going to get against Emerald Steel. They've done everything to improve this matchup while still being very good deck against the Sapphire decks. But I think it's still unfavored against Emerald Steel. If the Emerald Steel player is at least somewhat competent, they're going to still be favored. But I think now, deck building wise, everything has been done to mitigate how unfavored the matchup is.
One of my last questions here for Ruby Amethyst is: will there be enough Blue Steel in the metagame to discourage Ruby Amethyst from being played? That's another bad matchup, but Blue Steel out of the top 4, out of the 4 horsemen of this format, is definitely the least played deck.
Yeah, but I don't think that's like, I'm not sure that's the correct question to ask, because I think the Sapphire Steel matchup is very close, and depending on the Sapphire Steel list, either favored for them or favored for Ruby Amethyst. So I'm not sure that's the main thing for you to worry about. I would still, for me, if the question I ask myself to know if I'm going to play Ruby Amethyst at a tournament is like, how much Emerald Steel am I expecting? Because I still think that's the worst matchup of Ruby Amethyst.
Okay. If I were to answer your question, say that was the most played deck in the room, what deck would you be looking at?
That's the most. So either of the Sapphire decks, I think they're both favored into Emerald Steel, but Ruby Sapphire has the worst matchup against Ruby Amethyst. So let's say Emerald Steel is the most played deck. That would mean I play one of the Sapphire decks, and then if Ruby Amethyst is played a lot, I would play Sapphire Steel. If Ruby Amethyst isn't played a lot, I would play Ruby Sapphire.
Yeah, that's kind of where my thesis comes from, that if we can add, some very impactful tech pieces to the Ruby Sapphire deck against Ruby Amethyst, that I think we end up with the best deck in the room. I also wonder about tech cards for the Ruby Sapphire mirror, the one of Judy Hopps or something like that, like how impactful that can be. in terms of tempo. Like I've kind of been a Judy Hopps hater in the past, but I mean the card is non-zero impactful in the mirror. So I'm just wondering if at this point we can tweak the deck to sort of shore up some of those matchups and we can end up with the best deck in the room on the day.
Because we've done a lot of work on the Ruby Sapphire mirror in set 3, and I still think Macduck Mana, if you want to tech for the mirror, is the better tech than Judy Hopps.
I could absolutely see that. I mean, I had opposing Sapphire decks in the form of Sapphire Steel playing Macduck Manners against me. But that being said, like for the cards that we're adding into the deck to deal with Ruby Amethyst specifically, a lot of those are anti-location cards. Like that's kind of what we're looking to do to shore up some of the deck's weaknesses at this point. How do you feel about that from like a high level? Do you think that we could tweak the deck in a way that it would be a lot better versus location, still be extremely powerful as a core, and that we could sort of take Ruby Sapphire to, I don't know, the next level of power in this metagame with some of those changes? Or do you think it would dilute the deck too much?
So right now I'm on the fence about it. I think it's possible that is something we could do, but again, I'm not really sure it is possible, but it's something worth trying out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where my head is at right now. All right, let's talk about Blue Steel. So we have Harlan Sweets deck here. I pulled up. I haven't been playing a lot of this deck. I think this deck has gotten quite a bit better against Ruby Sapphire in particular in set 4, and we've talked about that really since the inception of the set. So it shored up one of its worst matchups, I think, in the metagame. Still, I don't think it's a fantastic matchup. There is a dichotomy between a lot of these Blue Steel lists. It's to play the wheel or to not play the wheel. The list we're looking at is playing the wheel. What are your overall thoughts on where this deck is positioned currently?
I think the deck's great. It beats Emerald Steel and while not being bad into Ruby Amethyst. So it's probably the deck right now with the most even matchups. It doesn't really have a weakness against any of the top 4 decks. But it also doesn't really have the greatest strength against any of these decks, except maybe against Emerald Steel. Regarding the versions, even in No Holy World, there's a big division between One Jump and Mickey Mouse lists, because it's not just this one card that they're changing. If you play One Jump, suddenly you want to maybe play 4 copies or like more copies of Zeus. You want to play Grammatadas to follow up the One Jump that can sing the Zeus. And then if you don't play it, maybe you have to play a few extra 1 or 2 drops like Hook or now that we're talking about in a bit is the Argus. Because if you can play Zeus to be a bit better against location, maybe you need to contest the board a little bit more early game so that you can challenge better into locations. Maybe it means you play more Wise of Titans. And then there's like lots of incredible amount of deck building decisions for the deck. How many Let It Goes do you play? Because Let It Go is pretty awful against Ruby Amethyst, but it's decent against Emerald Steel as hard removal for the Beasts and Robin Hoods, and then they just run out of cards. The ink doesn't matter. It's pretty good in the Sapphire matchups to deal with the Timer Tower without losing too much tempo. Then there's, I guess, you play 3 or 4 Grab Your Swords, how many Aerial or Bell as win conditions for the late game. Not even everyone's playing for Timer Tower, so there's like incredible amount of decisions. Which answers for Diablo do you play? Do you play Baboom, Fire the Cannons? How many of each do you play? Do you play Smash? So you also have something for the Cove Diablo and the Ursula Deceiver of All. So the 2 main developments in the deck, or not developments, the 2 main new things people are trying out in Sapphire Steel I want to talk about are 1, the 2-cost Argus, which is a 4/1 quest for 1, which is basically being run as an anti-Ruby card, especially Ruby Amethyst, because it's a 2-drop with so much strength. It doesn't get Medusa, it doesn't get Brawled. That's one thing. The next thing is Ruby Amethyst plays 4 Sisu of the 3 cost, but even Ruby Sapphire plays like a few copies, but Ruby Amethyst plays like 4 copies. And if you play this on 2, the Sisu is going to be very sad. Usually Sisu would chip in for a lot of lore, but now if they do, Argus can immediately challenge the Sisu. And also later in the game, having 4 strength into a castle means Argus plus a Smee can take out a castle, or Argus plus a Hook can take out a castle. So it has these use cases there, but at the same time, it's awful in the mirror, it's awful against Emerald Steel. But it's something people are trying out. The other thing is the Lawrence, which is a 3-cost 0/4 that has 4 strength if it's not damaged. Basically for a very similar reason, but because it's a three drop. It's unlike Argus, it's not one in the Mickey Mouse list. It's instead usually one in the one jump ahead lists for similar reasons, but it can also quest decently well if it's not.
I've seen that card actually being run. We're not seeing too many of them running around at the moment, but I've actually seen Lawrence pop up in a few Amber Steel lists, believe it or not. I think the card has potential. It's a really, really interesting card. So be cool to see it make its way into some decks.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of this metagame is actually pretty weak to locations and is definitely trying to compensate for it. Like, even if you look at the modern or the current editions of Ruby Amethyst, they've opted to cut the crab, which was, critical in dealing with locations at points. Obviously, Ruby Sapphire is weak with locations. A lot of our conversation has been like, how do we shore up this deck against locations? So I wonder if any additions of Jim Hawkins into the Ruby Amethyst deck would give you a lot of equity to kind of scam people out. Jim Hawkins actually made it into some of the high-performing lists at Atlanta just because people started teching away from being able to sort of deal with locations.
There's also another spicy deck that...
yes, I know this list.
What is this?
That did well recently. It was... So the main way it tried to cheese games is you go... It's Amber Ruby, and you just go just in time on 3. Jim Hawkins, RLS Legacy, and run away with the game. I haven't actually gotten around to testing it myself. It sounds very stupid and very fun.
Yeah.
Apparently the deck has a very, very, very bad matchup against Emerald Steel, but I don't know what it's like against anything else. That's all I've heard so far.
Yeah, I do wonder if we could add Jim Hawkins, like a couple of Jim Hawkins into the Ruby Amethyst list, and if it would be very powerful, because it should be quite powerful in the mirror, especially like now that I think that you could potentially sing a King Undisputed as well to sort of 1-for-1 eat your opponent to kind of take away board.
If you add the Jims in, do you have to add any more locations, or do you just keep the 4 Queens Castle?
Four Queens Castle.
I think it's just the 4 Queens Castle.
Yeah.
But I guess one big downside of Jim is like you have to get to turn 5 while having a good turn 4 while keeping 2 inkable Jim Castle in hand.
Probably not going to help versus Green Steel.
yeah. And then because often you would rather just play Queen's Castle on 4. So you need like Rabbit on 4 so you can afford to keep Jim Castle.
Wait,
that
5. Legacy location, doesn't that give cards evasive? Maybe that's like the late game answer to Diablo after they've drawn so many cards. Although if you're doing the just in time cheese, like I don't know, it just sounds funny to me. That deck.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about Amethyst Steel here. So
no, let's not, please. I have PTSD looking at this list.
So Spessy brought like some sort of more aggressively oriented Amethyst.
It's a budget deck. It's like $100. He's like, this is what we win, 100% win rate.
Yeah,
let's win the first set champs. So like he kind of talked me through the list. I think honestly the most interesting addition to this list, and I do actually like it a lot, is the 5-cost Bell. So he runs two of these cards. So this is the card that's 5-cost inkable 4/4 quest for 2. You move 3 damage from one of your characters across to one of the opposing characters. And the reason why this card gave me a little bit of trouble was it was a very specific scenario, but it can kind of force your opponent to not want to quest sometimes, depending on board states, because if you quest, then your opponent hits into your card, then they play the Bell, and they get like a really, really good exchange there. So Bell was an interesting tool of like dealing damage in a way. And like, again, I think it's actually probably better in the sense that if they don't know it's in the deck, then it's like really, really good. I was fortunate enough that I was just playing like Diablo, so I saw it in the hand and I knew to like play around it. So I guess maybe it depends. Like if you know to play around the card, it's like a little bit different. But that was like one of the most interesting inclusions. The other thing as well is this has the Shift Tinkerbell line, which honestly I haven't seen since set 1. I haven't seen anyone realistically be running this, but like it's still extremely powerful against these Emerald Steel decks. It's really good to like, you get rid of the bookie on turn 4 and stuff like that. So I think this is, as much as this is anti Emerald Steel, I know Spessy still really wasn't happy with facing me. He said Emerald Steel was still one of the toughest matchups. But yeah, I think this is just a kind of go fast deck. You've got the 1-cost Uninkable Maleficence there as well. So a little bit different to the Amethyst Steel deck that we were playing in the previous set, but similar at the same time. I think it just aims to go a little bit faster and be a little bit better positioned against like Emerald Steel and stuff.
I think
But
this deck would farm Ruby Sapphire too.
Yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah.
very much. I play tested a lot with him because you didn't know what to play for that tournament.
Mhm.
And I just told him, just play any of the top 4 decks, but that was out of the question for him, so we had to bring up something else. And yeah, this deck goes very quickly. Maleficent on 1 is extremely difficult to beat with potential castle and gold follow-ups for a deck like Ruby Sapphire. And then it's still unfavored against Emerald Steel, but the Tinkerbell on 3 can be nice because that suddenly means even if they don't have the shift Tinkerbell on 4, if you quest with any
I had to play around it. He said every time he was like, I don't like, I didn't have it, and then he'd be like, I top decked it exactly when I needed it. I'm like, of course you did, Spessy. Of course.
It's like as soon as you exert a character that's not evasive, they can challenge it and deal 2 to the Diablo, which you cannot really afford to lose. So it does a decent bit.
It's the threat,
slowing
bro.
them down.
It's like what we spoke about with that, like with the Mulan stuff early on, like with that Mulan shift. Like even if it's not in the hand, like you really do have to respect it a lot of the time. And then it's not like you can remove the small Tinkerbell easy. It's a 2/4 body, like unless you're playing Brawl, which sure Ruby Amethyst and the other decks are. So that helps a little bit, but
so it does multiple things because it has 4 willpower. It's actually a decent body to sing friends, but also it can bump into characters for the bell activation pretty nicely.
All right, last list we have here is Green Steel, stock standard Green Steel. I don't know what more we can say about this list. I'm sure that there have been.
Sorry, just to interrupt. This is not stock standard. I believe this is Moyen's original list, which is including a card that is not very standard in today's list, which is Prince John.
Oh yes. I don't know why it has my name on the list. It says Brendan Green.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not gonna lie, guys. I opened up the notes for today's podcast. I saw a list that said Green Steel with Brendan's name beside it. I was like, there's no way Brendan was playing Green Steel. Absolutely no way.
Yeah, check my Dreamborn. I'm clean. I don't think I don't have any Green Steel builds on there. What do you think that Prince John is still the way to go, Moyen?
To be honest, I thought it was the way to go week 1. But I haven't confirmed my suspicions because I couldn't get myself to play too much of Emerald Steel.
What a polarizing deck. What a polarizing deck. I think there's no other deck where it's like people are just like, I dogmatically refuse to play this deck. I mean, I've played it. Moyen's played it. We've played this deck online. But yeah, it's so different than the rest of the options in Lorcana. It's very polarizing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Like I haven't experimented with the Prince John since. I've literally just been jamming the Rats list, and I found it to be quite good. I liked the inclusion of like in Moyen's list here. There's just not any 4-drop Floodborns. I've actually liked having them. So the Jafars and the Flynns I think have been quite nice. I think the card that's been a little bit underrated has been the We Don't Talk About Bruno. I think that's like really, really good. Obviously pairs super well with the Prince John, but like it's weird. Like can be a really good removal tool at times, or like a disruption tool. Most of the time, it's just a nice target for Diablo. For like Shift Diablo, you just get rid of the Bruno, or you just ink it as well. But yeah, I think there's only so much innovation you can kind of do with the Green Steel list. But maybe Prince John is that little bit that might like take the deck in a slightly different direction. Like
that card makes the Ruby Amethyst matchup into this deck a lot harder. At least that's been my experience. All right, I gotta ask you guys. Store championships tomorrow. What are you playing?
When?
Best of 3.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Ruby Amethyst because it's best of 3, so I get my games too.
Yeah. Kala, Green Steel.
Yeah, probably Green Steel. Yeah.
You're like a cat. I feel like he's like captive to his. He plays his game on his own accord. He likes this game. He just hates fucking Green Steel, and he's just like. I feel like you're just like captive to the deck or something. Like, bro, just let it go. Let the deck go.
I don't know, bro.
It's a pretty good deck. I mean, to be fair, it's a good deck. I think that you might have a bit of results bias to your run at the recent set champs. Like, this is still a great deck. It's just
that's what it is. I already said it to Moyen. I was like, I just felt super bummed after it, and like I think I just have to quickly realize like this deck is still absolutely ridiculous. It's just It was 4 games that I played, and that was it.
Did you?
Well, not 4
did you
games.
0 4?
No. I went 2-2. Like, if I beat Spessy, which the games were incredibly close, I would have got like an Ursula probably. So, yeah, I don't know. I just had a bit of a downer, but I think it also comes down to the fact that this set, it's the only deck I've played as well. I've literally not played a single other deck. From day one, I've played this deck, and I just keep playing it. Not that, which is funny because you would think that, oh, like, you're on it, like, you're triggering Diablo all the time. I'm not ashamed to admit I've missed 1 or 2 Diablo triggers. Yeah, so make sure you remember those guys because they are very important. They stack up. But
Yeah, when is that
Yeah.
a miss? When is that trigger missed? So if I get in my turn,
that's a good question. Actually, yeah, I would love people in the comments, any people that are like deep into the rules, let us know. I guess just come to the Discord and let us know before we read out the comments for the next one, because I'd be very curious, because there are times when, usually if I'm very much on it, my opponent draws and I'm like, trigger, but then if my opponent draws and it's like 5 seconds later, I'm like, oh yeah, trigger. Like, when does your opponent say, no? You
Well,
know what I mean?
I would
it's
assume-
like very much. It seems like you just kind of whenever. Yeah.
I would assume it's when they do their next game action, like, or the next game action has passed. Then You
Yes,
can
I
no
would
longer
assume
do
that as well.
Yeah. If you play Green Steel Store Champs, don't expect any favors from me.
Yeah, so Brendan's gonna be like, draw, play this. He's instantly gonna do it. Yeah. He's not even gonna say draw. He's just gonna draw the card and then instantly play.
Insta ink.
Yeah.
Literally
Insta ink. Actually, yeah,
single
that's the
game
play.
act.
That's the game action. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I feel like Lorcana is probably some lax thing where it's like, they missed it fucking 10 minutes ago. Why don't you just give it to them? Oh, we're 5 turns later. Oh, just let them draw the card. That's been my.
I am curious,
how
though,
many
like,
cards
I-
did they miss?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's just draw the rest of your deck.
draw 15. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been especially at store champs. Like,
But no, like, as much as we're memeing, I would actually love, like, from anyone
yes,
that's
please let us
going to
know.
be present at challenges or whatever, because it is very important to know, for sure. Not only for if you're playing the deck, but also if you're playing against the deck, because, like Brendan said, if it's like literally the end of your turn and your turn's been going on for like a minute, and your opponent says, "Oh, I forgot to draw that trigger," and it's a high stakes tournament, like, you'd be like, "Come on."
Yeah, and
So.
bullying green steel players doesn't count. You know, you're. No, don't do that. I'm joking. Anyway,
Alright.
sweet. Good luck at Bochum, guys, and be
Yes.
sure. I'm interested to see what list you land on. I'm interested to see like what the gameplay
You're not
is.
interested to see what list I land on, Brendan. Come on, you're not talking to me. You're talking
You
to Blaine.
switch.
You're
Hold
not
on.
talking
You're
to
a
me.
big. You're a big deck switcher though. I could.
You know what?
see
You know
switching.
what? I'll give a bit of insight. You know what I was thinking last night? I was like, what if I just play Ruby Amethyst?
But
But I play
aggro.
the aggro.
Yeah. Yep. I know this.
The classic Kawa strat.
Bring back
yeah.
Arthur LeFou.
Yes, bro. Let's do it. Yeah.
I'm interested to hear about how the games go, because I do think that, on average, people are going to be much less practiced than they were for the set 3 tournaments. So I'm keen to hear like how it goes for you guys and how the early rounds go. Because I don't know, at Atlanta, I don't want to say this, but I had some easier matches, to be honest. Some were easier than others. So I'm interested in how that scales into Bochum now without the online resource. Anyway.
Yeah.
Hope you
And if
guys do
people
well.
If
Big-
people see us there, please come and say hi, and definitely form an orderly queue in front of Moyne, and he'll take your contact details for coaching.
Yeah, he'll
Don't
take
worry.
your PayPals. He'll take everything.
Yeah.
Takes tips.
He'll give you like a ticket number, so you have to come back and actually talk to him later. Yeah, he's that busy.
He has surge pricing enabled on his coaching. If you guys know. Anyway, also if you have a T-shirt, definitely wear your T-shirt.
Yes.
Unless you're Moyen and you don't have a T-shirt.
Don't have one.
When you come to the US, Moyen, I have a T-shirt for you.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, if you listen to this podcast, number one thing you do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really does help a lot. Video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/@Podcana podcast. Hit that subscribe while you're there. We're like 3,500 subscribers. Twitter's at Brendan APG, Moyen_HS, and Kalbatech_CG. CG. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you next week.